and our newly elected board member, Mary Like, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have somebody move the agenda table, please? Moved by Ms. Farmer, second by Mr. Stetzel. Any additions, corrections, deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the agenda? That passes 9-0. Moving on to staffing, can I have somebody move staffing to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Maloney, seconded by Ms. Malor. Any comments, questions, concerns on staffing? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0, and I just want to take a minute to recognize Dr. Kathy Colicchio on her retirement and thank her for her years of service to the Greece Central School District. She's going to be missed. Moving on to 2.02 tenure. Can I have somebody move the tenure to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Stetzel, second by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. Moving on to 2.03, to Gusto MOA for building subs. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Farmer, second by Mr. Stetzel. Any comments, questions, concerns on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. Moving on, 2.04, Gusto MOA Dental. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Malor, second by Ms. Farah. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. 2.05, the GTA MOA flag football. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Farah, second by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, concerns on that one? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. Moving on to 2.06, the District Safety Officer Agreement. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Stetzel, seconded by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, concerns on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. Moving on to item 4.01, Code of Conduct presentation. Superintendent Groutman.
Yes, thank you. I know we have Dr. Zaffitz and Dr. Baker here to present to us this evening. This is a presentation that we do every year because it's part of some structures that exist and also process that exist for us. So what they're going to be doing today is sharing a bit about the actual Code of Conduct and some recommended changes to that we have elicited from a Code of Conduct committee. So, and I also just want to clarify, our Code of Conduct committee, which they'll talk about, meets throughout the year to get feedback from different stakeholder groups, to make sure that we're really digging into the actual document as it exists, and then recommended changes get brought here so that we can adopt later on in August after people have had time. So I think what's important to note about that is that process has evolved and changed and been added to every year for several years. So in addition to some really significant that work was done to improve the document years ago, each year our hope is that we get feedback to find out what's working for schools, what's not working for schools, in terms of our ability to support kids and hold kids accountable and adults to what's in that document. So I appreciate the work because it's not just doing a presentation tonight, it's really making sure that you're hosting those meetings, looking at what's happening in schools and listening to a lot of different stakeholder groups. So thank you so much for the work, and I look forward to hearing the presentation.
Thanks, Kathy. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our new board members. Looking forward to working with you. The Code of Conduct, like all of our Greece documents, is grounded in the mission, values, and commitments laid forth in the REACH 2027 strategic plan. We believe the current framework reflects the major components of our mission statement, giving our leaders the authority to make decisions aimed at building a culture of high standards and supportive relationships. It also emphasizes our foundational purpose as an institution of teaching and learning. As such, this Code of Conduct reflects our core belief in the importance of teaching with high expectations and high support for all of our students. The Code of Conduct is divided into 10 central sections, including roles and responsibilities of all stakeholder groups, definitions of appropriate and inappropriate behaviors, and descriptions of infractions and their accompanying behavioral consequences and interventions. The appendices include legal language regarding disciplinary procedures, New York State reporting requirements, and a separate section on our athletic code of conduct. We will detail some of these sections throughout the presentation tonight. The Code of Conduct applies to all students, district personnel, parents and guardians, and other visitors. The document is structured intentionally as a multi-tiered system of support, proactive and reactive interventions and consequences designed to work together to support all students. It provides the tools for helping students to understand and appreciate the norms of behavior within a district, build culture and relationships, promote positive behaviors, respond to negative behaviors, and teach necessary skills. It details prohibited conduct and provides guidelines for appropriate discipline, suspension, and other punitive consequences. It's important to highlight the relational aspect of the document as well, as students are far less likely to engage in disruptive and disrespectful behavior if they have genuine relationships with the adults and peers in the school community. In addition, according to the meta-analysis research by John Hattie, teacher-student relationships have an effect size of 0.72, nearly twice as high as the 0.4 hinge point of an educational component that typically leads to 1 year's academic growth. By approving the Code of Conduct, the board gives administrators the authority to make decisions and assign appropriate consequences and interventions to hold students accountable for their actions while building these relationships and skills for our students. I'll now turn it over to Christine to take you through the language changes to our document for this year and update you on our work going forward.
So just wanted to call out that we have a committee of multidisciplinary stakeholders that come together. As Kathy said, we meet 4 times a year to review some input from those stakeholders. So that includes students, teachers, and board members. So thank you to Mark and Megan for being our liaisons this year to the Board of Ed and for your input and participation in that. So the changes that we're going to go over are not large changes. Most of what we talked about, so we had a lot of conversations about implementation and practices in the Code of Conduct, around the Code of Conduct, but as far as recommendations to the document, they were fairly minimal. Some of the conversations included memorializing restorative practices, interventions that were previously labeled as pilots. So because the Peer Accountability Council, for example, was just a pilot at the Arcadia campus, it's expanding to all 4 high schools for next year. So we wanted to memorialize that in the Code of Conduct and define what it was. Same thing with the vaping and marijuana intervention that started as a pilot and never was labeled in the Code of Conduct, and so we wanted to call that out and define what that looked like. So you'll see on page 19, we have a definition of what the Peer Accountability Council is. That's like our teen court process that we've talked about, where they go before the jury of their peers, in addition to a traditional long-term suspension. We also defined what skill-building alternatives to suspension was. We know the language, we talked the last time we presented to everyone that alternatives to suspension is misleading. It sounds like there isn't a consequence, and most of the time what it really means is that there's a skill-building component in addition to a traditional consequence. So an alternative to suspension means in lieu of a long-term suspension, they might have 2 days of ISS, and they have a skill-building project that goes along with that. And we call that an accountability project or a character connection, where they're actually learning about a different way of going about solving a problem if there was a conflict. So instead of fighting, what could we do differently to resolve a conflict, for example? We also, on page 23, added language around level 1 referrals. We wanted to be clear that in cases where a teacher is managing the behavior, that there is a phone call that has to be, or a contact that has to be made to that family, because level 1 referrals are going into Infinite Campus, and we found that there were some cases where parents were not being notified by the teachers, and so we wanted to make that point very clear, that if it's a teacher-managed behavior and they're writing it up, the parents do need to be contacted in those cases. On page 24, you'll see that there are some new additions added to the document. These aren't new consequences, but we found that they weren't called out. We did a match-to-match analysis of what was in Infinite Campus, what state ed requires in terms of reporting structures, and then what was actually called out in the Code of Conduct, and we found that these were missing from that page, so we just wanted it to be consistent across all of the levels. So those aren't necessarily new. They've lived in Infinite Campus and in other places in the document, but we're missing on page 24. On page 28, we clarified that students who will be referred to substance abuse counselors for intervention are not just for nicotine or marijuana-related offenses. The way it was listed before seemed very limited. Any substance abuse infraction, we make a referral to our substance abuse counselors. So it was just expanding the language there, because before it looked like we wouldn't refer unless it was just for nicotine or marijuana, and that's not the case. For any substances, we refer to our substance abuse counselors in addition to any consequence that the student might receive. For page 46, we expanded computer and electronic misuse to include that it would be capturing or recording images in a way that could be disruptive. We know that there has been incidents that include videoing a fight that leads to a major disruption, and so we wanted to ensure that that was language that was utilized, that was clear within the electronic misuse section of the Code of Conduct. On page 33 and 34, you'll see that it sort of runs onto 2 pages. Before, it was called PINS, a person in need of supervision, and that what used to be what a school can make a referral to get support for a student that might be having behavior issues. That's now called the Family Access and Connection Team. It's been that way for several years, but the document was never updated, so we caught that change and updated the language in there. It's called, we refer to FACT team, who then might make connection to different county services. So we just made that update. And I'll turn it back over. Those are all the actual changes we made, and so I'll turn it back over to Dr. Zaffetz.
All right, thank you. We spent a lot of time putting together the presentation for tonight. We thought differently about it because our climate and reality are also different now. Student behaviors were a central point of discussion for the district, the board, and the community last year. We believe it's important to acknowledge and clarify a few things that have become more salient or have been misrepresented to the board and community as part of our presentation this evening. First, we've compiled our most recent data on student attendance and behavior that we'll share with the board in the near future. Our realistic goal has always been to reduce, not necessarily eliminate, problematic behavior. We're proud to note that overall this year, our broad numbers for each major section of that report moved in a positive direction. That includes attendance, office disciplinary referrals, and both short and long-term suspensions. We need to acknowledge and thank all of the staff, students, and families that worked hard to make this happen. However, we've always prioritized analyzing multiple levels of data, and we acknowledge that the numbers are not the whole story. Students with disabilities and students of color are disproportionately present in all of our metrics, and we continue to address negative student behaviors in school. There's still a lot of work to be done. It's important to be honest that keeping up with the increasing needs and challenges our students face is difficult. Levels of adolescent depression and anxiety are at all-time highs. According to 2023 Monroe County data, 1 in 4 adolescents reported that they felt so sad or hopeless every day for 2 or more weeks that they stopped doing their usual activities. And nearly 2 in 3 high school students right here in Greece reported having 1 or more adverse childhood experience, or ACEs, things that include substance abuse in the home, witnessing extreme violence, or personal physical or sexual abuse. Often these challenges manifest themselves in external behaviors in our schools, and we are working hard to build systems of support for students in these difficult situations. The Code of Conduct provides the framework for our staff to address these diverse circumstances. We're constantly problem-solving issues in school that begin and continue in the community into the nights and weekends that school is closed. It's not a perfect science, and despite our best efforts, these issues still present disruption. However, strong relationships, home visits, and proactive reporting and monitoring of social media have led our staff to preventing countless altercations. When out-of-school issues do present disruption or the potential for a disruption, the Code of Conduct has been a resource for administrators to communicate appropriate rationale for behavioral consequences with families. Progress monitoring and communication regarding student behaviors is an area of focus for us. We'll provide an update on that later in the presentation. It's also important to be very clear that our students are assigned consequences when they misbehave. There aren't incidents that are swept under the rug or blown off. Not perfect, but we are not ignoring these negative behaviors. Our teachers and administrators work very hard to address each instance appropriately, and they base those decisions on our Code of Conduct. In addition, our interventions are based on high expectations and high support for our students. Social and emotional learning has been referred to as a distraction several times, yet we almost universally acknowledge that our students are deficient in the very skills these interventions teach. Skills such as conflict management, responsible decision-making, and other pro-social behaviors. In the 2023 survey I mentioned earlier, 1 in 3 Greece high schoolers reported that they had difficulty concentrating, remembering, or making decisions because of mental or emotional challenges. These challenges are a major distraction. We believe we have an obligation to teach students these lacking skills and help build social and emotional capacity. We also have data to show that students who participate in the Code of Conduct restorative interventions that Dr. Baker mentioned earlier, like peer mediation, the Peer Accountability Council, and the vaping and marijuana intervention programs, demonstrate skill growth and are less likely to repeat the offenses that got them into trouble in the first place. Out of 214 students who participated in peer mediation at Arcadia Middle School last year, for example, only 8 required repeat mediation, a 96% success rate. Our hope is that the Board of Education can see that we acknowledge that there are things to work on. However, we believe strongly that this Code of Conduct and accompanying Board of Education approval will allow us to continue to provide the best combination of consequences and interventions to address our challenges.
So Mike talked about acknowledging that we have an implementation. We've talked about consistency with implementation for years. That's not necessarily new, and we're still working at it. And some of the next steps that we're taking in order to level that up from the previous work that we have done, we are honoring this within our a proposal for our district comprehensive improvement plan that still will come to this board and also to state ed for approval. And so within that, we've called out goal 3 to focus on recidivism specifically for behavior. So that was feedback we've heard before of really calling attention to that. And so that is something that we've taken steps within, concrete steps as a district, but also every building, especially at the secondary level, will have that also as one of their goals within their school improvement plans. We're also working to expand alternative programming and working on creative options for students because we know we can't always count on placements elsewhere. So how can we build systems of support within our district to help with that? We also plan for next year to expand secondary representation on the Code of Conduct. And because we know that this is where the bulk of the issues lying, not to say that there isn't behaviors at elementary, but we know that this is largely a secondary issue. And so we need to really focus in on that and to solve the problem. So there will be working groups at each secondary campus that has district office support along with building support that really analyze the problem on each campus to come up with a working plan within their school improvement goal around behavior. So that will include student services support, security support, and special education support with that. And then we're also exploring other contracted services to help with that support if needed to really expand. So we're really taking that of multi-layered support in terms of implementation. We want to know that that is still our continued area of need. The document is a great guide, but how we implement it consistently continues to be something that we're committed to focusing on for next school year.
And to close us out this evening, we mentioned earlier that the Code of Conduct lays out the roles and responsibilities of all stakeholder groups. This is helpful because we're facing issues that require collective action. Everyone in the learning community can help implement. As the board, our hope is that you approve the Code of Conduct and support administrative recommendations for resources and programming. And we thank you for doing that historically. Our administrators can properly plan and progress monitor behavior systems, as Dr. Baker just mentioned. Teachers continue building relationships. Parents, please get involved in your school parent groups, monitor your children's social media, and work with other parents. And then students, participate in leadership opportunities and become upstanders. If you see something, say something, as is laid out in our code of conduct. So that's it for the presentation this evening. Thanks for your attention, and if anyone has any questions.
Questions? Mr. Stensel?
Thank you. I'm not sure how this works. Do I get one question, then okay. 'Cause I have a bunch, so I apologize.
I'll come back to you.
All right. So I just wanted to go to page 9 in the presentation, and I just really see clarity. And by the way, thank you for the presentation. I think this is really great. I think we're going in the right direction. I'd like to just understand with the referral process, where are parents involved with that? Are they informed of it when they're getting a referral? Do they have to approve of the student going to a counselor? Things like that.
Yep, so the parents are contacted by either the administrator or a substance abuse counselor will reach out. So the student has to be willing to engage. We know that counseling doesn't work unless they're willing to engage. So that always happens prior to any referral happening or any outreach from the counselor.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Stensel. Ms. Lake?
Have you looked at mentoring programs, you know, like in the community, and people who have been to the dark side and can kind of have an impact, even incarcerated prisoners sometimes? It's quite amazing. Is that something within the scope of what you're looking at?
Yeah.
For kids that just, no matter what you're doing,
Yeah. So we have a new contracted service called Delphi, and so they're working at Phoenix Academy currently, and we're working to expand that service to one of the high school campuses for next year. So they have a program where they're recovering addicts, and so they're coming in to support with mentoring services, just like you shared. Yeah.
We also have a relatively new contract with an organization called, oh, it just skipped my mind, but it's community violence, gang violence, that's been regionally working with the Buffalo area and Rochester area, as well as some national contracts as well, so.
wonderful, thank
Is that Cure?
Excuse me?
Is it Cure? Is that who it is?
It's not Cure, and I just
Okay.
had the name on.
I was
the tip
just
of my
curious,
tongue.
it was them, because that's, I know, we've been using them, so,
No.
sorry. Tracy? Mr. Farmer?
Set up. I'm glad to hear about the next steps. I'm glad I had the unbelievable privilege of spending a week at Chautauqua Institute, listening to Father Greg Boyle every morning, and the homies that he brought with him, their stories and the impacts that they make on one another. And to follow up with that, one of the, and I'm sure this isn't new to you, but I'm wondering if kids who, need something more, are they, is it possible that we have some kind of, something set up where kids, whatever their interests might be, that we could steer them into some kind of a job that they might be interested in? Obviously at the, higher level in schools, but that was something that brought, this gang initiative, just having work began this whole huge conglomerate that they now have today. So I wanted to throw that out there. Do we have any kind of services that might match up kids to something that they're interested in, versus, and it's not always the $15 an hour,
Yeah.
but you hear what I'm saying.
So yes, so that's part of problem solving each individual student. What are they interested in? And so that's always at the table. But one example of that specifically is through our peer accountability council. Students who have served as jurors who were previously suspended, that's one of the sanctions that they serve as a juror, and they go through that training and now want to pursue a career in criminal justice, for example. And so we've helped them to get involved with the teen court in Rochester downtown, and so we have a few examples of students who are pursuing careers, so.
Mr. Bonagoro?
Thank you for the presentation. Glad to hear about the references to John Hattie's work. Did you look into the specific types of relationships that he references that have a positive effect size? Obviously, there's a wide range of relationships and interactions. So anything in particular that stands out is helpful there.
Nothing more than a positive teacher-student relationship and putting explicit effort into building those relationships. I think that's the characteristic of the school that leads to that effect size.
Okay, I would think that there are probably interactions that emphasize accountability as opposed to the more, I'll just say kind of fluffy relationships. And so, I mean, that's what I've seen as being helpful from the
Yeah.
meeting I've done. Are we pursuing a particular approach with regard to that?
I mean, just one thing is just like high accountability and support, right? So that means we keep our standard high. I think that that's exactly the misconception, is that with support, sometimes we think we're lowering the expectation, and it's quite the opposite. And I think we have some work to undo that we hold the standard and we're supporting them to that standard versus lowering what that expectation is.
Okay, thank you.
The only thing I would just add is that we've talked a lot with our leadership and in a lot of our professional learning about being a warm demander, the phrase is. So still having that relationship and intentionally building that relationship, but holding your expectations high, as opposed to working in the sentimentalist frame, which is lowering your expectations while trying to build that relationship.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Farah? Then I'll get to you, Jordan. Sorry.
Thank you, guys, for this. I just wanted to touch base. I did mention this during committee. I wanted to kind of go back to it regarding the in-school suspension. I know that was a lot of focus this past year with the behaviors that we had. What are we doing for in-school suspension? I mean, we were told that they were kind of going to the unit office. We really don't have a place. Maybe we do. Is there a room? Because long ago, when I was in high school, we did have that room, per se, and there was somebody in there. I know that there was accounts for some schools not even using in-school suspension as a tool. So how are we mitigating that?
Yeah. Most of the reasons that was happening were staffing issues. And so I know that the schools do not want to repeat that again, to have the plan, because that is limiting, exactly what you're saying, is that there's only so many options at that point. And so that's exactly what we're looking at each campus to say, what are the structures that you have for the progressive discipline model on the campus, and then also the support. So even talking about detention after school, we're talking about Saturday detention. We used to do that. And so adding in structures that really are available not only on each campus, but district-wide, to make sure that there is a continuum that's built.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to see more on that, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Stutz?
Last question, I promise. I just wanted to make one quick comment and just say I appreciate that you brought up ACEs. When I put on my public health cap for all the work I do teaching in that field and have worked in that world, it's an area that needs more attention, especially with the demographic that we're dealing with here in the district and the changing, evolving situations going on. So thank you for bringing that up and putting a spotlight on it. That being said, I wanted to ask, the data that you specifically called out, Dr. Zaffitz, is that from like the Youth Behavioral Risk Survey of Monroe County? Okay.
Yeah, 2023 survey.
Okay. And just the last piece, on page 13, the exploring contracted services, could you just give me a little bit of what that means? Is that like Genesee Mental Health?
Yeah,
or-
so we have the violence prevention grant, and so there's, what's that?
Looking beyond. That's what the name of the.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Looking Beyond. He just thought of the organization for the gang violence prevention. But we have the violence prevention grant, and so within that, we're looking to fill some of those. So for example, there's an organization called Creative Hope Studios that we hope to partner with that does more studio work in terms of music studios, and it's for students who are at risk. And so having a service like that could be available on a campus. So those are the areas we're exploring through the grant to expand what we already have. Delphi is new, we're hoping to expand them. So there are multiple partnerships, which is why we didn't list every single one. And
Thank you so
Some are to
much.
be determined, yeah.
Ms. Like?
In my last one. We were astounded when we had a day of literacy training to find out that with juvenile detention centers, the greatest factor in recidivism was illiteracy. Above everything, every horrific thing that somebody went through, chances, if they can't read, they wind up back there. And they're doing all of this new reading program now that's really focusing on kids and intervention and maybe linking that to the behavior problems and then using maybe summer kinds of things that specifically deal with kids with behavioral problems, but linking it to that literacy piece.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Farmer?
Like a technical question, I guess. Level 1 goes into Infinity?
Infinite Campus.
Infinity Campus, thank you. So with AI and making contact, is it possible to have something, so the referral goes in, parent contact needs to be made. Can something technology-wise, can Infinity Campus email parents or contact parents about whatever it is?
So Infinite Campus is our student
But
information
it would
system.
be friendly language, not just this kind of, and I don't know. I want to put it out there. I think it would help teachers in terms of management and those kinds of things, but I
Yeah,
don't know if
just
it's
for point of
possible.
clarity, Infinite Campus is the student information system, so it's going in as a referral into the warehouse that we put behavioral referrals into.
Okay.
So it was just the point, there was misunderstanding that was going in and being a part of the behavioral record. And so that is the conversation of making sure there's contact with parents, because it is going to be in there, so parents might have questions
Yeah.
and wanting to know more about that. So that was the intent of that. How the contact is made, I think, could be flexible, but it was really just ensuring that we know we had to make that contact with the parent so that they were aware that was going in.
Because I think a parent asked that question when we were at the meeting at Olympia. He said, I don't know about this
Yeah.
stuff, so thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Bongoria?
Page 7 talks about those changes, trying to pursue other strategies before going to the level 1 referrals. And I think in the Code of Conduct Committee in the past year, I think it's particularly the past year, we've been breaking out that data. Is that correct? Where level 1 referrals are tracked, but then,
Looking at 2 and 2, 3, yeah.
well, not 2 and 3 only, but also those, yes, teacher managed. We're going to continue to track that. A concern, frankly, is that by breaking those out, we kind of might lose sight of the fact that these issues are still out there, and we're just changing the coding on them. I don't want that to happen. I want to make sure we're still tracking all of that, so that is going to be the case.
Yeah, so we'll still track it. We never tracked it before. So that's why we called it out separately, because when you compare the year to year, those never went into Infinite Campus before. So we're calling it out so you can still see the full bar of the referrals. But when you look year to year, we never put them in Infinite Campus. So they'll still be in the separate colored bar on the top, layered, so that you can see both of them.
Including the teacher managed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I have a follow-up. So if I've heard one primary concern from teachers in this area, it's been a sense, and it's not been uniform from school to school, but it's of an inconsistency or lack of support from administration. And there are some schools with better reputations of upholding the code of conduct than others. So when I look at the charts, and we've got, you know, the breakdowns are by different categories, and yet the consequences, the responses have a very wide range. And it can go in each, I don't see any changes in here, but it can go from had a conversation with the student to suspension, long-term suspension, you know. But with, you can always go down to that bare bones, had a conversation. What changes to address that and brings more consistency and really enforces that higher standard?
So in terms of consistency in the back, so there shouldn't be that wide range. So I think that's about implementation, because in the back, it's pretty clear. For example, if there's a physical altercation like a fight, we have a consequence of what level that at least starts at. And so one thing that I think the additional secondary folks joining the Code of Conduct Committee, or at least an ad hoc for, could be having that conversation of calibration, specifically at secondary. It's difficult to have those when you have elementary and secondary in the Code of Conduct, because we know that a third grade versus a 12th grade, that we're really not going to be as consistent, but hopefully, to your point, that on a 912 campus, we'd be more consistent across the campus. And so the additional reps from secondary will be with the hopes of having those exact conversations around calibration and better understanding the document in the back for Appendix B, which is the guide for at least having some sort of a start to be as tight as possible, knowing that individually, we are looking at factors of if it's the first offense, second offense, what's their grade level, what other factors are there within each. So there are always going to be those individual, but to be as consistent as possible. We know we do have work to do in that area.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, one last one. You mentioned the deeper look at recidivism. That's something I will be very interested to see, you know, the data that you can share on that. And I just want to make a comment on the peer accountability group. We had the presentation last year, which was great. What's striking to me there is these are students who really want to participate and want to make a change. That's the great news about it. What's the bad news is that there are a lot of students who aren't in that, and finding ways to move them, to address those students is the real key. The ones who want to be in the peer accountability group, I think we're excited about that, right? They're moving in the right direction. So I don't know if you have any thoughts to comment on that?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that the incentive to, part of the reason that students will participate in the Peer Accountability Council is to reduce their suspension by completing the sanctions, which has gotten students into the Peer Accountability Council who, without that incentive, probably wouldn't have gotten in there, and they've turned into success stories. So I don't want to discount that piece. But I do understand your point. So last year, we spent a ton of time redesigning the out-of-school suspension process to include checkpoints and supports along the way. So there's an orientation meeting for the re-engagement center, there's a midpoint check-in, there's a preparation meeting when they're getting ready to return to their home school. And all along the way, there's a group of adults there between the re-engagement center and the home school and like the Center for Youth or any outside supports that really look at the individual kid and the circumstances of that student and what does that student need to make sure that they have the best chance for successfully transitioning back in. So just like many of the things, it's not perfect, but we're really trying to really individualize supports based on each kid. The other thing I'll mention is that we're working right now between Dr. Baker and then Rachel Hawkins at Phoenix to see is there structural things that we can do within Phoenix Academy in the alternative learning setting that may be appropriate for students who are long-term suspended that may not be ready to transition back in at the end of their suspension, or other unique circumstances like that. So we're trying to get creative because we do realize that not everything we've done has worked so far.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I just have a couple. On page 6, Christine, you talked about the skill building alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me, like,
Yeah.
kind of like what, some examples of those skill building alternatives might be?
Yep, so for example, if a student engages in a verbal altercation, and so they get 2 days of in-school suspension, they might say, you have 2 days of in-school suspension, but actually, so we're trying to model it after the peer accountability council, you're actually only going to have one if you complete this project that talks about understanding the conflict cycle. Why do you get involved in conflict? What's a better way of managing when you disagree? How can you talk to people with I statements versus yelling, or get your point across in a different way? How do we repair harm? Will you repair the harm? And so it's taking what we've learned from the peer accountability process, which its limitations are that it's just for long-term suspensions, which we know then we're almost too late. How can we get to students earlier? And so we're trying to build those structures in an in-school suspension model to mirror that process. And so there has already been a lot of work, especially at the Arcadia campus, but working on other campuses to try to take what we've learned to apply it.
Okay, thank you. And then on page 7, the changes, it's in reference to the, the level 1 referral, where we talk about the three interventions, and is it 3 parent contacts as well, so each intervention gets a parent contact, or is it 3 interventions, 1 parent contact?
So part of what, every single time there is something that's entered Infinite Campus, a parent gets a call. So whether that's the teacher or whether that's an administrative response, we're calling home. But when we say to go to the next level, that really we're trying to build the classroom intervention approach. So that way, we know that there are classroom interventions that can happen for low-level behaviors, that we can help to make classroom management better for students, to feel more inclusive, to lower the likelihood that more of that lower-level pervasive behavior could be eliminated. So just working with teachers to think about what their structures are at the secondary and elementary level in terms of what that looks like. So it's really about trying something different. So this is what my classroom structure is. I might need to change Johnny's seat to sit more at the front of the class in terms of proximity, because now just changing the seat is actually lowered the likelihood that he's blurting out in class, as an example. Okay, that didn't work. It's still happening. Now I'm going to try positively reinforcing when he's not blurting out in order to get that behavior to reduce. So those are just examples of more classroom managed strategies.
And the parent or guardian contact to go to the next, each intervention stage and then to a level 1 referral, I don't necessarily need a response, correct? Or do I have to wait for a response? I just have to say, I sent an email to Mr. McCabe, or I called his cell phone on such and such a date and left a message that I had a conversation with Bill about his behavior in class. And
Right, so we
Okay.
hope that if, that we make contact and we hear nothing back, if it's happening again, we're still not getting that contact, that maybe try another method of communication just to ensure the messages are getting through. But yes, it's not expected that we'd have to hear back.
Okay, and then I just have, on page 11, and I guess this is just for the family access to the connection team, like what level of absence are we looking at before we would make that call, I guess? Is it Sean's out 2 weeks, we have no idea, Sean's been out a month, or it's over the course of half a year, I've missed 60 days? I mean, what's that, is there a magic number with that, or?
No, but we have to show that we've taken steps for intervention. And
Okay.
so FACT is really clear, like if you haven't done a home visit yet, you're not going to,
Gotcha.
make a FACT referral. If you haven't shown that you've made the phone calls or other intervention services, that they wouldn't accept our referral. So there are certain interventions that we are expected to do as a district before making that.
And my last thing is just a comment. I really love the next steps, with the implementation. I know we've all been talking about for years, and I love the fact that we're, still working on that, realize it's a concern and that we have to get better at that. And I love the fact that you guys have come up with ideas how we can get better at that. And I just want to take a moment to thank you guys for giving this presentation tonight. Okay, you're supposed to go before me. Mr. Maloney.
I'm sorry that I waited so long for a question, but how many children students are we actually talking about that don't abide by the code of conduct? Is it 10%, 5%, 20%?
It's a great question, and it really depends on how you would define don't abide by it. I would say, though, if you look at the behavior report, which is coming your way soon, you'll see a breakdown of students in the different tiers for office disciplinary referrals, and it falls within what's considered a normal kind of, how do you say it? Distribution, I guess, of students within the levels of support. So right around 85% of students who are tier 1, which means they don't need little to no support.
Right.
10 to 15% that are in tier 2, and then very few that are in tier 3. So we do fall in kind of that normalized range.
As a district, but each campus might have some variance
Yeah,
within
very
that. So that's district-wide data versus looking at each campus, because each campus might be slightly higher or lower than that.
And then
Right.
elementary,
But
secondary.
it's within a close range. So our kids are wonderful, by the way.
That's true.
Mrs. Farrar?
I just wanted to piggyback off that because we did talk about that in the committee. We got district information and we kind of said, well, it would be more helpful to kind of see per school what we're kind of looking at and maybe breaking that down a tad. Is
So
that
you'll
so-
see that in Goal 3 and the District Comprehensive Improvement Plan, we're breaking it down by school for recidivism rates to track that.
Perfect, thank you.
Just want to thank you again. And just for the public, at our second August meeting, we'll have a public hearing on the Code of Conduct, and the Board of Education will be voting whether or not to adopt the Code of Conduct that evening. So with that, thank you both. Moving on to 4.02, District-Wide Safety Plan Presentation, Superintendent Grauman.
Yeah, so just like we review the Code of Conduct and bring that forward every year, we do the same with our district-wide safety plan. We have Casey Vogel, our new Director of Safety and Security, here to present this evening. As you can see in the presentation, our board members see that it's a fairly short presentation. There's some reasons for that, which Casey will describe. I would also just like to publicly say thank you to Steve Chatterton. So Steve Chatterton is here, our former Director of Security, Safety and Security, who has kindly served as a resource to us since he retired. And it's been really helpful in terms of ensuring a seamless transition for Casey, who's done an incredible job. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you guys for the first time officially and present something. So tonight, obviously, I'm going to be presenting the district-wide safety plan. Spacebar? Is that going to go? All right, good. So our district-wide safety plan is updated every year. Some years more than others. It was last updated at the same time last year. There's some slight changes from the main plan, and usually those are to meet state mandates through the State Education Department. So our current plan in the copies that you received meets all New York State mandates, and we're going to post it on the district website for a period of no less than 30 days for public review. The district-wide plan is a general guideline, and it's not very specific, and that is kind of by design. So in June of '24, this draft was passed along to the entire safety committee or safety team for the district. It was reviewed, and then we were given the thumbs up by everybody on the committee to present it in its form that you see tonight. Different than district-wide safety plan is building level emergency response plans. Those are very specific. Those include functional annexes with tactics, things like that, that are not something that we distribute or publish for the general public to see for reasons, obviously, that's not something we want to be broadcasting. So changes for this year include just some minor terminology changes that were, dictated by state ed. Those are, instead of a building level emergency response team, it's a planning team now. We had to add the word planning. For the district-wide safety team, we added that bus monitors and bus drivers could be members of the district safety team. We added some language to include that the district has a robust workplace violence policy with some verbiage on that and a link to the website that contains the policy that was put together by Human Resources. So today we open it to the public comment, and it will be posted for 30 days, no less than 30 days. And if approved, we'll present it to the board next month at the 20th for your, your approval if you see fit. And really, that's it. So are there any questions?
All right, like Director Vogel said, next month we'll have a public hearing and we'll vote on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right, moving on to 5.01, can I have somebody move the change orders to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Malloy, second by Mr. Stetzel. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or concerns on these? Seeing, I'll just make a comment. Those change orders amount to $22,706, give or take, Mr. Cloley? Perfect. There was a refund on one of them. With that, any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. Moving on to non-district transportation request. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Mrs. Malloy, second by Mrs. Farmer. Any comments, questions, concerns on that one? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. Moving on to the tax certiorari refund. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Stetzel, second by Ms. Farmer. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? That passes 9-0. Moving on to the school bus bond resolution. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Bonagorio, seconded by Ms. Farmer. Any comments, questions, or concerns on that? Seeing none, all is in favor. That passes 9-0. Moving on to transportation service bid award. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Maloney, seconded by Ms. Malloy. Any comments, questions, concerns on that? Seeing none, all is in favor. That passes 9-0. Yep, you can talk to Mr. Cooley tomorrow or Mr. Richardson right now if you want in the back. All right, with that, did we vote, Debbie? Okay, we voted, good. Just couldn't. Moving on to business information, the revised 23-24 property tax collections report. It's written information only. Does anybody have any questions on that? All right, seeing none. Moving on to budget and revenue status report. Does anybody have any questions on that? That's written information only as well. All right, and then finally, anticipated bids, it's written information only. Is there any questions on that? All right, moving, oh, sorry. Yep, Mrs. Farmer, go ahead.
Thank you. So are we going to get more information about this weapons? Is it what we already have, or are we getting something?
We're good, it's a bid for it. Companies are gonna bid for a
Okay,
weapons,
so
so we're
we're not there.
not there yet. Nope,
Okay.
so that's why it's written information only. All right, perfect. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Can I have somebody move the consent agenda to the table, please? Moved by Mr. Maloney, seconded by Mr. Stetzel. Is there any comments, questions, or concerns on that? I would just like to thank Nancy Massing for her donation to the Arcadia High School in memory of Roy Bauman. I'd like to thank Mr. David Brown for his donation to the Arcadia High School in the memory of Roy Bauman. Extra classroom at several different schools, the Grease Storm and Hilton Cadet hockey teams for their donation to responding to emergency, and the Ken and Molly Traub Fund for their donation to the district, and for Mike Setzer and Patty Patterson for their donation to the Linda Ingram Scholarship, and Chris McMullen and Carol Kelly for their musical instrument donations. With that, all those in favor of the consent agenda? That passes 9-0. Moving on to policy 39.01, policy 3220, public participation in board meetings. Can I have somebody move that to the table, please? Moved by Ms. Farrar, second by Mr. Maloney. Any comments, questions, or concerns on this? I guess I'll make the first comment because I made the change. We're gonna limit it to basically we're removing that anybody can speak at a Greece Central meeting. You have to be a resident, or an employee of the Greece Central School District to be speaking at a Board of Education meeting. You can't live in Webster or Fairport or Henrietta and come and speak at a meeting. So that's the change. With that, oh, Mr. Setzel, sorry.
Is there any way to propose another amendment to this policy?
You could.
Should I tell you, or how do I do?
Well, you gotta tell me how you,
Yeah, all
what
right.
it is.
All right, I'm not sure how the process goes. So on the page 2 of 3,
Yeah.
under letter E, I'd like to move, or I'd like to propose moving the time to speak from 2 minutes to 3 minutes. I think it's fair. It lets speakers get their,
Let me just get a second, and
Yep.
then I'll let you comment on it.
yep.
Is there a second on that?
Could you say it again, please?
Yeah, so on page 2 of 3, under letter E, a speaker's comments must be limited to 2 minutes unless the board president extends the time. I want to just change it to 3.
Okay, I'll second that, but I want to add something to that, so.
Okay, well,
All right,
slow down. All right, so there's a motion and a second to change from 2 minutes to 3 minutes. Now we're on to discussion. Mr. Stetzel, you made the proposal, you get to speak.
So, I'll make it short and sweet, but having stood up there many times to speak, 4 minutes was too much. 2 minutes is too little. I barely could get my feet off the ground, and I think 3 minutes is a nice, happy medium. People are going to say what they're going to say regardless, but, that's their right, as long as they're staying within the guidelines that the district and we vote on. And so I guess I just don't see any harm with allowing people that extra minute.
All right? Ms. sorry.
I had something to say about it, but I'd like to change something else about it. Is that, sorry.
So you want to amend the amendment?
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me what you want to do.
Okay, that it would be 3 minutes, and then unless a board member with majority support would like to extend that up to 4. So that a board member as well as the president who wants to hear a person finish can have the option of doing that.
So can you repeat that? So unless a board member,
Okay, a speaker's comments must be limited to 3 minutes unless a board member with majority support extends that time up to 4 minutes.
for an individual.
Yes, for an individual.
okay, is there a second on that? Mr. Stutzel, second. So now we have an amendment on the amendment. So you can speak now on the amendment to the amendment. So in relation to, unless a board member, do you want to speak?
Yes.
Mr. Maloney?
The only problem I see with the majority of vote on your part anyways, is the length time. They can submit to the board in writing. If they can't finish it verbally, they're more than welcome to submit anything in writing. And, we'd all take a look at it and discuss it at a later date, or at least we'd have it anyways if they couldn't finish. That's always been that way, so I just don't know why we would need any additional time, but
I think a couple of times I've seen people have a little difficulty getting started and having difficulty being up there speaking and being an emotionally charged situation and feeling like they really had to finish it. It was a really important thing. And so I would just like to see people have a little grace where that's concerned.
but
Mr. Maloney? Go ahead.
on your amendment to the amendment says that you still need majority of the board to agree to that extra minute.
Correct.
So that means that the person would have to stop
Right.
and then ask a board member or board members to extend the time for another minute.
Yeah. Sometimes you can say a lot in a minute to kind of finish up.
Yeah, I understand.
So
I understand. Okay.
that's the thought anyway.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're on the amendment to the amendment. Are there any other conversation or questions, concerns, or comments on the amendment to the amendment?
I think I like.
Mrs. Farmer?
I'm sorry. I think I like.
Microphone?
I think I like what you're saying, Bill, but I don't know if people are aware of that. If they were to, and I hear you, Mary, too. I just feel like it's awkward in terms of, so do people know when they call to speak that if they type something out or whatever, they can give it to us? So that's told them.
Yep,
They told
Debbie
that.
tells them that.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're still on the amendment to the amendment. Oh, Mr. Bonagario, sorry.
I guess I'll just add a comment that, I can see how it can be awkward, but that doesn't need to be really an issue. I think there are the few instances where that comes up, a board member has the opportunity to just ask, can we extend an extra minute? under the circumstance. And I think we've probably seen a couple of those situations, and I don't think it needs to be very awkward.
Mr. Maloney?
But Mary's asking for a vote from the entire board. So this person up there speaking is going to be nervous to ask a board member, then sit there and wait till we all vote on it, you know, especially if, let's say the vote's 5-4 or 4-5 or 4-6-3 or whatever. They're going to get a little nervous that three people don't even want to listen to me.
Oh, that's valid, too.
You know, I mean, I think I would feel funny up there at that time. If I was nervous, at least I could submit it to you in writing, you know. I may not be able to speak it, but I may be able to write it and have you understand it. Just an opinion.
Mrs. Farmer?
Okay, so I guess I'm just going to look at this. So it says E, a speaker's comments must be limited to 2 minutes unless the board president extends that time. How does that, like, what would that look like? What would that process look like? And how would you determine who gets to speak longer than other people?
Basically, I give you grace. What my policy has been is I give you about 15 seconds of grace.
Oh.
And we agreed when we did this policy originally that it was a hard 2 minutes, but I typically give every speaker, and I time it almost to
Yeah,
a
I've seen
T. And it's usually between 15 and 20 seconds. I give extra to finish up, and then you're done.
So you just don't say anything, you just let them continue to talk, is
Yeah.
what I've
I
seen.
usually say, I need you to wrap it up. It's a 2-minute
yeah,
mark.
yeah.
And then I let them finish their thought, and then thank you very much for coming
Okay.
and speaking before the board.
So then I have to go back to Mary and saying, what if it's something that we think maybe I want to hear something, and it will only take 15 more seconds? Is there any way to implement that into this whole piece?
Isn't that what kind of Mary's saying, is kind of to extend it?
But without taking a vote, kind of like what
Oh, okay.
Sean does, so
I mean,
we're
it-
not making it awkward. And you hear what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying, Ms. Farmer. I mean, did you have something else you want to say? I don't want to interrupt. Okay. So I guess my concern with this is, and I agree with Mr. Maloney, is a person's up speaking, they've spoken for the 2 minutes, I've, told them to wrap it up at the 3 minutes according to the amendment, where I'm giving them 3 minutes, I usually give them another 15 or 20 seconds, then I'm gonna have to cut them off and say, stop talking. And because Mark or one of us is gonna have to raise their hand and say, I have a point of order, I would like to grant Mr. Kalili an additional 2 minutes to speak or a minute to speak, then we need a second. Then, once there's a second, there's discussion. So, I mean, I just think it's a bad situation to open that door. And, what should really, in reality, be 30 minutes of public comment could then turn into an hour of public comment at the end of the day, or longer. And I think that, I do have an issue with that. I mean, I think in 3 minutes, and every speaker knows that they have 3 minutes, they should be able to wrap it up in a 3-minute time frame, in my opinion. Mr. Bonagoro?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McKay, but I think we actually already have that policy in place. I believe a board member can request that of you, and that can be extended.
It is. I mean, it's the same situation. It'd have to
Except
be a
it wouldn't
vote.
be a vote.
Yeah, and wouldn't be timed. It wouldn't, I mean, Mary, I think I don't know, did you say 5 minutes or an additional minute? I couldn't remember. Additional minute. I'm looking, I don't have my glasses on, so I can't read. But we do have that policy in place currently. I mean, if it was something that was truly, an issue, I think there is the avenue to currently address it. So are there any more questions on the amendment to the amendment?
Is that the 3-minute one?
Nope, where we stop and vote to extend the time. Okay, so all those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, can I please see you raise your hands? I guess we'll do it easier that way. All right, I see 2, those opposed? 1, 2, 3. Is that hand up, Megan, or?
I'm 50-50
Where are you going
on
here?
this one.
3, 4, 5, 6. So the amendment to the amendment fails. So we're now back on the original amendment by Mr. Stetzel of extending the time to 3 minutes. All right, is everybody caught up? I don't know if I'm caught up, but are we caught up? Okay. So is there any more discussion on the original amendment from Mr. Stetzel? Okay, so with that, All those in favor of going to 3 minutes? That passes 9-0. And so now we're back on the original resolution. Any other comments, questions, or concerns on the original resolution? That was the amendment. So the amendment we're good on. Now we're back to the amended resolution. So we're on the amended resolution. So, can somebody hit me? So we're on there, we're back to the resolution. Is there any other comments or questions on the original amended resolution?
Would you repeat it?
I almost forgot what it was.
So basically, the changes to the resolution would be Mr. Stetzel's amendment of changing from 2 minutes to 3 minutes, and on everything else before you in the policy.
Wasn't there something about only Greece residents?
Yep, that was in already. That was in the policy originally.
Okay.
So that's what the change was originally, but that wasn't an amendment. So that's the original, so that's what we're voting on.
So
So
we're
now it's
voting
the,
on that.
so it's the black, it's the what you have in front of you, it's the crossed out, the bolded, black ink, and then Mr. Stencil's 3 minutes. So is, Mr. Barnacle, a question?
Yes.
Sure.
Rather than initiate a proposal, I'm going to ask a question.
Sure.
So I understand the merits of limiting it to residents and certainly employees of the district. I know we have had at times people from civic organizations or such come in and have something to say that, you know, maybe it's just a short announcement of some sort, but is there an opportunity perhaps to have, for a board member to sponsor someone from outside, a non-resident, non-employee, who might have something, it's not going to be, I'll just use a loose word, a crazy.
Crazy, you said?
I wouldn't have used that phraseology, but okay. I think there is a way to do that, and we do that through, like, when we recognize people, when we bring groups in, it would just be added to the agenda that Mr. Bonagori wants to bring in the, some person to speak in regards to, and we'd have a discussion, and, you know, what it would be in relation to, and if it meets the district policies, et cetera. I mean, I think if you start sponsoring people to speak, we end up on a slippery slope, especially in a public comment area, in my opinion.
Okay, that's
So,
fair.
Ms. Lake?
I'm thinking back to a transportation issue with children being transported to other places, so the people that were on the receiving end were not in Greece, but the transportation was by Greece, and it's like they had a real vested interest.
I mean, if they're a student of Greece, their parents can talk. I mean, their
Even if
parent
it's
or
a
guardian.
temporary thing?
Yeah,
that-
like if they're
okay.
homeless, if they meet the homeless standard,
Okay.
and we're transporting them, for example, they would meet the criteria to
Okay.
speak. Anything else? So we're back to the original resolution with the amendment. We're all good? We're all on the same page? Yes, Mr. Moore, I'd be happy to tell you. So it's on page 1 of 3. The crossed out is we're removing other interested persons, and we're removing Greece Central School District runs by the first priority to speak. It's just open to Greece residents. And then identification for proof of residency or employment will be required. And then we added 3 minutes to the time. So those are the changes that we've agreed to this point. And now we're in discussion. Is there any further discussion on this? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, the resolution is amended.
Sorry, we're just voting on your amendment.
No, we're voting on the whole resolution. Okay. Ooh, I got a headache. That passes 9-0. Okay, I think we're done. Does everybody understand Robert's rules now? And Mr. Maloney?
Can I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Mr. Stencil, Farmer?
Mr. Stencil and Mrs. Farmer, all those in favor? Nobody ever wants to stay. That passed 9-0. Thank you, Mr. Butler, for zooming in. We appreciate it.